Good evening, and welcome to News of the World. It's Tuesday, July 14th. Tonight we drift slowly across 28 countries, from Angola to Argentina. There's nothing you need to do, and nowhere you need to be. Settle in and let the world turn. Angola is making a quiet but significant shift in how it manages its money. The country is allowing commercial banks to use the Chinese yuan for their reserve requirements. It is a practical move, adding the yuan to a list that already includes the US dollar and the euro. For years, the dollar has been the dominant force in global trade, but here, the ties with China are deep and long-standing. They stretch back through infrastructure projects, oil exports, and shared diplomatic interests. Allowing the yuan to sit alongside the dollar and the euro in bank reserves is a reflection of that relationship. It is a way of acknowledging that a great deal of Angola's economic life flows eastward toward Beijing. For the banks, it offers a little more flexibility, a broader set of tools to manage the daily currents of trade and exchange. It is the kind of change that happens quietly in the back offices of financial institutions without much fanfare. Yet it tells a story of a country steadily widening its horizons, making room for the currencies that match the realities of its trade. And as the night settles over Luanda, the financial systems hum along, adjusting to this new rhythm, a small shift in the vast machinery of a changing world. Saudi Arabia's south has known a rare quiet these past few years, a truce that held longer than many expected. This week, that calm cracked. Missiles and drones fired by Yemen's Houthis struck toward Abha airport, and Saudi forces say they intercepted what they could. It is the sharpest escalation between the two sides in some time, and it follows accusations from the Houthis that Saudi strikes hit a Yemeni airport first. Each side points to the other, and the truth of who moved first may matter less now than what comes next. For years, the war in Yemen has sat just beyond Saudi Arabia's southern edge, close enough to feel, far enough to hope it might stay there. A fragile peace had been holding, uneasy but real. Now there are fears that this exchange could widen, drawing the Houthis deeper into a broader regional conflict involving Iran. Behind the scenes, reports suggest Saudi leadership received backing from Washington for strikes on Houthi targets, adding another layer to an already layered situation. If you're still with me, you might wonder what this means for ordinary people on both sides of that border. It means uncertainty returned. It means the sound of interceptors in the sky, and families counting the quiet between them. Saudi Arabia has worked hard in recent years to steady itself, to look forward. Tonight, that steady gaze turns south, toward a calm that is frayed, and toward the hope still held that it might hold again. Slovakia has made a decision about its role in the war just across its eastern border. The president has said the country will not join NATO's military aid to Ukraine. For a nation that shares a frontier with Ukraine, this carries particular weight. Slovakia sits in the heart of Central Europe, and the conflict has been close enough to shape energy markets, to send refugees through border crossings in the early months, to remind people how fragile peace can be in this corner of the world. The president's statement is a recalibration of sorts. Not a withdrawal from the world, but a line drawn about what kind of help Slovakia is willing to offer and what kind it isn't. These are never simple calculations for a small country. There's history layered deep here, decades behind the Iron Curtain, then independence in 1993, then the long work of finding a place in the European community. Every decision about war and alliance passes through that memory. If you're still with me, picture Bratislava in the evening, the Danube quiet beneath the old bridges, and a country weighing its conscience. The night settles, and the choice has been made, and somewhere eastward, the war goes on. The Netherlands has spent centuries learning to live with water, pushing back the sea, draining lowlands, building systems that most countries can only marvel at. But these days, the challenge runs the other direction. Persistent drought, paired with rising demand, is pushing the country toward water shortages. It's a strange thing to picture for a place so identified with canals and rain and below sea level polders, but the dry spells have been coming more often, and they linger longer. Farmers need more, cities need more. The land so carefully engineered to shed excess water now finds itself having to hold on to what it has. What makes this worth carrying tonight isn't alarm, it's the quiet reversal. A country that wrote its history in terms of too much water is now reckoning with too little. And the Dutch, who never do anything halfway when it comes to water management, are already adjusting, talking about retention, about efficiency, about which fields can wait and which cannot. If you're still with me, consider what it means when a nation famous for conquering water starts having to ask where the next supply will come from. It's not crisis, not yet, but it's a shift, the kind that settles into a place slowly, the way dry ground takes in rain. And for the Netherlands, it may be one of the defining stories of the years ahead. Australia has spent 30 years building something the rest of the world is starting to notice, a retirement savings system called superannuation, where employers set aside a portion of wages into funds that grow over a worker's lifetime. It is ordinary in Australia, the kind of thing that sits quietly in the background of pay slips and pension statements. But these days, it is drawing attention from an unexpected quarter. Reports suggest the system has caught the eye of Donald Trump, though the full reasons remain unclear. What is clear is that Australia's superannuation pool has grown into one of the largest in the world relative to population, a vast reservoir of invested savings that funds infrastructure, markets, and long-term projects for a country of around 26 million people. That is no small thing. The system is not without its critics at home. Debates continue about fees, access, and whether the balance serves everyone equally, but its sheer scale and steadiness have made it a reference point beyond Australia's shores. If policymakers in Washington are looking south, they are looking at a structure that has quietly compounded over decades through booms and downturns into something substantial. Whether it offers lessons for elsewhere is a question for others to weigh. Tonight, in homes across Australia, superannuation statements sit in drawers and inboxes, doing their slow, patient work, and the wider world, it seems, is paying attention. Eswatini, the small landlocked kingdom between South Africa and Mozambique, has been quietly taking steps to prepare itself for the kinds of disruptions that cross every border these days. The government is moving to ratify international treaties aimed at strengthening both cybersecurity and disaster response, a decision that ties the country more formally into global frameworks for handling modern threats. For a nation of just over 1 million people, this is less about grand ambition than about practical readiness, the kind of planning that matters most when something goes wrong and help needs to move quickly. Cybersecurity has become a concern everywhere, and Eswatini is no exception, as more of daily life, commerce, and public services shift online. Disaster response, too, sits close to home in a region where droughts, floods, and seasonal storms constrain even the best prepared communities. By ratifying these treaties, Eswatini signals that it wants to be part of the wider network of countries that share information, coordinate responses, and stand by one another when the unexpected arrives. It is the sort of news that might not make loud headlines, but it carries real weight for the people who live there. If you're still with me, you might think of it as a small kingdom quietly checking its foundations, making sure the walls are sound before the season turns. And in a world where so much feels uncertain, that kind of steady attention to what holds a country together is worth noticing before we move along. Singapore, that small island nation where so much of the world's trade passes through, has posted growth that surprised the forecasters. Its economy expanded by 5.7% in the second quarter of the year, a pace that beat expectations according to early data. Now, depending on where you read it, the tone shifts a little. One outlet calls it a slowdown from earlier in the year. Another calls it a beat. Both can be true at once, and in Singapore, they often are. The economy there moves with the rhythm of global trade. When the world's ships and shipments and services are flowing, Singapore feels it first, and feels it keenly. What's striking is the steadiness. This is a country of fewer than 6 million people sitting at the crossroads of Southeast Asia that has built its prosperity on being reliable, on being the place where goods change hands, where capital finds a home, where the rules are clear. A 5.7% expansion in a world that has felt uncertain is not a fireworks moment. It's something quieter. It's the sound of an economy doing what it was designed to do, perhaps a little better than people expected. If you're still with me, just hold that image for a moment. The port at dusk, the cranes moving, the numbers adding up to something steady. Somewhere out there, the night shift is keeping watch, and the quarter has closed better than anyone thought it might. Sudan has known little quiet these days as a civil war grinds on, pulling countless lives into its wake. The fighting between the national army and the rapid support forces has reshaped daily existence across the country, and the wider world has been searching for ways to quiet the guns. This week, the European Union took a new step in that effort, strengthening its sanctions regime to target Sudan's gold trade. Brussels is banning gold imports, hoping to cut off the lucrative funding that keeps the conflict alive. It is an attempt to squeeze the resources fueling the fire, though the measure leaves some harder questions untouched. The EU stopped short of sanctioning the UAE-backed militia accused of grave atrocities, a choice that leaves the diplomatic response feeling incomplete to many observers. There are also new pressures on the army itself, with the United States escalating concerns over allegations of chemical weapons. It is a heavy, tangled web of violence and diplomacy, yet underneath the weight of these headlines, the people of Sudan carry on as they always have, finding ways to endure. For a country where wealth so often slips through the hands of ordinary people, there is a quiet hope that tightening the flow of gold might, in some small way, loosen the grip of war. And as the night settles over the Nile, that fragile hope is a thought worth holding on to. Kenya has raised its renewable energy target to 5,500 megawatts by 2034, a goal that speaks to something the country has been quietly building for years. If you've traveled through the Rift Valley, you may have seen it, steam rising from the earth, harnessed into power. Kenya already draws most of its electricity from renewable sources, more than almost any other nation on the continent. Geothermal wells in the Rift, hydro from the Tana, wind farms turning on the northern plains. The new target pushes that further. It's a statement of intent that the country's growth, its factories, its homes, its schools, should be lit by the earth itself. There's something steadying about it. In a world where energy transitions often feel like arguments, Kenya has tended to treat it as practical work, the kind of work that doesn't need shouting. 5,500 megawatts is a large number, but the meaning underneath is simpler. Enough power for a growing country, kept close to the ground it came from. And maybe that's the quiet ambition, not just more energy, but energy that belongs to the landscape. The rift gives its heat, the wind gives its motion, the rivers give their flow. Kenya is listening to all of it and planning accordingly. A country leaning into its own natural rhythm, building something meant to last. In the Maldives, that scattered necklace of islands in the Indian Ocean, something quiet but meaningful happened in June. National zakat collections doubled. For a country where Islam shapes daily life, zakat is not a casual gesture. It is one of the 5 pillars of the faith, a structured act of giving, a share of one's wealth set aside for those who need it most. So when the national collection doubles in a single month, it tells you something about the rhythm of life across those islands. It may reflect a season of generosity, a moment of renewed attention to obligation, or simply more households and businesses calculating what they owe and paying it forward. The Maldives is a place many of us picture as a destination, all turquoise water and overwater bungalows. But the communities living there, spread across more than 1,000 islands, have their own patterns of faith and care that the visitor rarely sees. Zakat is one of those patterns. It moves quietly through the year, collected and distributed, reaching people whose names do not make the news. What doubled in June was not a statistic. It was an act of giving repeated and added up, and somewhere in the Maldives, in a household or a neighborhood that few outsiders will ever visit, that generosity arrived as something practical and real. If you're still with me, let that thought settle for a moment and we will move on. Suriname, on the northeast coast of South America, has watched the ocean off its shores draw growing interest from the world's energy companies. These days, that interest is taking a more concrete shape. The American oilfield services company Halliburton has secured integrated contracts for drilling and completions at Gran Morgu, a deepwater project offshore in Suriname, operated by Total Energies. The agreement covers the specialized work of boring into the seabed and preparing wells for production, engineering that happens far out at sea in water too deep for ordinary rigs. For Suriname, a nation of fewer than 1 million people, Gran Morgu carries weight beyond any single contract. The country shares its coastline with Guyana, where massive offshore discoveries in recent years have reshaped an entire economy. Suriname's own waters hold similar geology, and for some time now the question has been whether that promise would turn tangible. These contracts suggest the answer is leaning toward yes. The work moves on its own schedule. Deepwater projects take years of planning, of testing, of building what's needed to withstand the ocean's demands. But the pieces are gathering. Halliburton's involvement means the drilling plans are growing, becoming more than lines on a map. Out past the mangroves and the river mouths, the Atlantic floor holds layers of rock and quiet possibility. The coast remains calm. The rigs will arrive in their own time. Italy has been quietly carrying one of the largest shares of Europe's recovery effort, and these days economists are still working out what that weight means. The Recovery and Resilience Facility, the European Union's shared response to the pandemic's economic shock, directed significant funds toward member states hit hardest, and Italy stood among the largest recipients. A new analysis from the Center for Economic Policy Research looks at what that investment has meant, not just for Italy, but alongside Spain and Greece, the 3 countries whose economies drew the closest attention. The details are still being studied, but the broad question is simple enough. When billions in shared European funds move through a country's economy, through infrastructure, through green energy projects, through digital modernization, what actually changes? Does growth follow? Does employment lift? Do the benefits reach the places that needed them most? For Italy, the stakes feel particular. The country entered the pandemic with public debt already high and growth already sluggish. The recovery funds were never just a cushion. They were a test of whether large-scale European solidarity could translate into lasting change at the local level, in southern towns, in aging factories, in schools and railways. The answers won't come all at once. They'll arrive slowly, in budget reports and employment figures, in lived experience of communities that saw the investment arrive. And for now, the work continues. Steady, unglamorous, the kind of story that rarely makes headlines but shapes a country's future all the same. St. Lucia has done something it has never done before. This week, the island crowned not one but two national carnival queens for 2026. A piece of history made quietly in the way these things often are, under lights, with music, with people watching and cheering and maybe not fully realizing they were witnessing a first until the moment had already passed. Carnival in St. Lucia is not a small thing. It is color and rhythm and weeks of preparation, steel pan bands rehearsing late into the night, masqueraders sewing beads onto costumes by hand. The Queen pageant sits at the center of it all, a showcase of poise and cultural pride and the particular kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly where you are from. To crown two winners is to say something, though exactly what the island is saying may take time to settle. Perhaps it is a recognition that one crown could not hold all the talent on that stage. Perhaps it is a widening of what beauty and representation mean. The headlines call it history, and they are right. But history in the Caribbean often arrives dressed in sequins, carried on the shoulders of a community that has been preparing for this moment longer than anyone outside it could know. If you are still with me, picture that stage. Two women, two crowns, one small island holding its own a little differently this year, and somewhere beyond the lights, the sea, doing what it always does. Andorra, tucked high in the Pyrenees between France and Spain, has been living and breathing mountain biking these past weeks. The tiny principality, one of the smallest countries in Europe, hosts a round of the Mountain Bike World Cup, and the trails above its valleys draw riders from across the globe. The cross-country racers went first. Jenny Rissvids and Boichis came out on top in the Exco World Series, finding their rhythm in Andorra's thin mountain air and steep climbing. The U23 fields raced too, the next generation testing themselves against a course that punishes hesitation. Then came the downhill. The track, by all accounts, was rough, blown out and raw, the kind of surface that rewards commitment and humbles anyone short of it. Valley Hole was among those finding speed on it. Amari Pierron, a fixture at the top of the sport, went down, a crash that shifted the overall standings and put Jordan Williams into the lead. And riders from North America, Americans and Canadians alike, found the podium. What stays with you is the setting. Andorra is barely larger than a single valley system in some countries, and yet for a few days each season it becomes the center of this sport. The riders climb into real altitude. The crowds line narrow tracks cut through pine and scree, and the mountains, indifferent to results, simply hold it all. Chile is opening a window for new debt sales this week, stepping back into international markets with a calm that seems to set aside whatever risks may be gathering. The reporting from Bloomberg frames it plainly. Investors are looking past mounting risks, choosing to engage rather than wait. For a country that has long carried a reputation as one of South America's steadiest economies, a debt sale is part of the ordinary rhythm. Governments borrow, investors lend, and the machinery of public finance keeps turning. What makes this moment worth pausing on is the space between what investors are doing and what observers are warning. The risks themselves aren't detailed in the available reporting, but they're real enough to name, and they're being met, at least for now, with a kind of measured confidence. That tension between caution and forward motion is where the story actually lives. Chile has been here before, in different forms. Through years of unrest, through pandemic, through the long debate over its constitution, the country has often found itself watched closely by markets and citizens alike. Each time, something steady has held. Whether this window closes with the same quiet it opened with, only time will tell. But the buyers are there, the sale is moving, and the risks are being held at arm's length, not dismissed, just set aside long enough to do the work at hand. Belize has stepped into a role it has never held before. the pro-tempore presidency of COSFIN, the Central American Security Commission, for a country that sits on the quieter edge of the isthmus. Small in population and often overshadowed by larger neighbors, this is the kind of moment that doesn't make noise but matters. COSFIN brings together the nations of Central America to coordinate on regional security, the shared challenges that cross borders easily and solve poorly alone. Belize, with its Caribbean coast and its English-speaking history, has sometimes sat slightly apart from the Spanish-speaking consensus to its south and west. But security, like weather, doesn't much care about a border. The Commission's work touches trafficking, organized crime, and the fragile stability that lets ordinary life go on, in markets, in schools, in homes. Taking the pro-tempore presidency means Belize will help guide that conversation for a season. Chairing meetings, setting agendas, keeping the thread between member states. It's a rotating role, passed from one country to the next, but for Belize it's a first, and there's something quietly fitting about that. A smaller nation stepping forward, not because it's the loudest voice in the room, but because its turn has come and it's ready. Mozambique knows something about what the sky can bring. The country has lived through storms and floods that arrive with little mercy, and the work of preparing for them never really finishes. So there's a quiet weight to the news that 30 local drone pilots have been certified, part of an effort supported by the African Development Bank Group and partners like UNICEF to strengthen disaster response across the country. These aren't drones flown from distant control rooms. They're operated by people who know this land, who understand what a rising river means for a village they might pass on the way to work. The idea is straightforward. When disaster strikes, the first hours matter. Being able to see the road, the bridge, the flooded field from above can change what happens on the ground. Mozambique has been building this capacity for some time now, expanding a drone program that draws on international support but keeps the expertise local. The graduation of these 30 pilots marks a step, not a dramatic one, but a real one, toward a country better equipped to face its own emergencies with its own hands and eyes. In Cabo Delgado, further north, nearly 1 million people face severe food insecurity and displacement continues. The challenges are large. But somewhere in Mozambique these days, 30 people are learning to read the landscape from above, and that feels like something worth carrying into the night. Estonia is planning a new military base near its eastern border, one meant to house about 1,000 troops, at a cost of roughly 15 million euros. It's a small country and a quiet one in many ways, but it sits along a frontier that has felt less settled since the war in Ukraine began. The decision to build isn't sudden. It follows years of conversation among the Baltic states about what preparedness looks like when your neighbor is large and unpredictable. For Estonia, defense has always been a fact of life. A small nation with a long eastern edge, reading the weather carefully. A base of this size won't transform the strategic picture on its own. But it signals something steadier. A country putting concrete and planning behind its sense of what the years ahead may require. The location matters too. Near the border means near the people who live there, in towns and farmland that have long existed in the quiet space between two worlds. If you're still with me, you might picture it. Flat fields, pine forest, the kind of landscape where a new building goes up and the horizon barely changes. Estonia has chosen to build, not with alarm, but with the calm of a place that has learned to watch the horizon and take it seriously. Türkiye has reached beneath the Mediterranean, completing a natural gas pipeline that runs across the seafloor to northern Cyprus. 101 kilometers of pipe, resting in deep water, now links the mainland to an island that has long lived with a particular kind of isolation. For northern Cyprus, this means more than fuel. It means a tether, a line of connection running through dark water, carrying warmth to homes at the far end. Subsea pipelines are quiet things. You won't see them. They lie where the current moves over them, doing their work without ceremony. But their reach is real. 101 kilometers is not a short distance. It's a deliberate act, a decision to close a gap that geography left open. Cyprus itself sits divided, its history layered and unresolved. A pipeline doesn't settle that history, but it does say something about endurance, about the long view, about showing up for people across the water. If you're still with me, picture the Mediterranean at night. The surface still. Somewhere below, gas moves through a pipe that took years to plan and build, arriving now where it's needed. And on the island, someone turns a knob on a stove and the flame catches. A small thing, a quiet thing, but it comes from farther away than it used to. North Macedonia has finished something quietly practical, a freight bypass around its capital, Skopje. It's the kind of news that doesn't make much noise, but if you live along the old rail lines, you might notice the difference. For years, goods moving through the country by rail have had to thread through the heart of the capital. That means slower journeys, congestion, and the steady rumble of freight trains passing through neighborhoods where people are trying to sleep. A bypass changes that. Freight can skirt around the city now, taking a shorter path and arriving sooner. It sounds simple, but in a country that sits at the crossroads of the Balkans, moving goods efficiently matters. North Macedonia has long been a transit point between Central Europe and the Aegean, between East and West. Every minute shaved off a journey is a small argument for choosing this route over another. The project is complete, and the promise is shorter transit times. What that means for people living near the old lines is quieter nights. What it means for logistics companies is a more competitive corridor. And what it means for Skopje itself is a little more breathing room, a city that can go about its business while the heavy goods pass gently by, somewhere on the edge of things. Malta has always been a crossroads, and these days it's living that role more fully than perhaps ever before. Nearly a third of the people who call the small Mediterranean archipelago home are foreign nationals, born somewhere else, making their lives on these islands. That's a striking proportion for a country of roughly 500,000 souls. People have been arriving steadily, drawn by work, by Malta's growing appeal, by a reputation that now reaches well beyond Europe. The islands have even been ranked as the top country in the world for wealthy residents, outpacing places like Monaco and Singapore. But the deeper story isn't just about millionaires. It's about the broad, ordinary mix of people who now share these streets and harbors. Change on this scale brings its own questions: housing, development, the pace of life on islands where space has always been limited. Malta has been adjusting its zoning rules, trying to keep pace. Tourism, too, keeps surging, with Greece, Italy, and Malta together drawing a new wave of travelers through the Mediterranean. What stays with you is how a place so small absorbs so much of the world. That figure 1 in 3 tells you something about opportunity, something about movement, something about how an island makes room without quite losing itself. If you're still with me, picture those limestone streets at dusk. You might hear a dozen languages carried on the same warm air, and somehow, it still feels like Malta. Belgium, home to the European Union's main institutions, sits at the center of a measured response to a major cyberspying campaign. The EU and Britain have moved to target Russian intelligence officers said to be connected to the operation. The details remain limited in public accounts, but the response itself carries weight, the kind of decision shaped in Brussels, where so much of Europe's common life is managed. It's a reminder that the quiet work of diplomacy and security often happens far from the headlines, in meeting rooms and offices where the stakes are real, but the pace is deliberate. There's something about the nature of cyberspying that makes it feel both distant and close at once. Invisible networks, quiet intrusions, the sense that somewhere, someone is looking through a door you didn't know was open. Belgium, for its part, has long been a place where the continent's threads come together, a small country holding a large role, hosting the institutions that try to keep things steady when the pressures come from outside. The city around those institutions carries on as it always does. The trams and the squares and the shifting languages, all continuing their rhythm. If you're still with me, you might picture that rhythm tonight, unhurried, persistent, the kind of steadiness that doesn't make much noise but holds things in place. And the work goes on, quietly, in the heart of Europe. Mongolia sits between two large neighbors, but these days it's looking further east toward South Korea. The two countries have entered what they're calling a golden era of partnership, and the signs of it are everywhere in daily life. Korean retailers have been expanding steadily, betting on the appeal of K-culture, and one convenience store chain alone, CU, now operates 600 stores across Mongolia. That's 600 small lit doorways where Mongolian and Korean daily life meet. But the partnership runs deeper than commerce. It reaches into infrastructure, into modernization, into the practical work of building connections between two places that have chosen to invest in each other. And it reflects something Mongolia has long practiced, keeping its doors open in many directions, building relationships that give it room to move. For a country whose history stretches across centuries of empire and reinvention, this friendship with South Korea is still relatively young, but it's growing. And the roots it's putting down in shops, in culture, in shared projects suggest it's more than a headline. If you're still with me, a golden era sounds like a grand thing. But sometimes it arrives quietly, one small exchange at a time. And tonight, across Mongolia, that seems to be exactly how it's taking hold. Greece is waiting for a story it already knows, told in a new way. Christopher Nolan, the filmmaker known for intricate large-scale cinema, is adapting the Odyssey, Homer's ancient epic of wandering, longing, and homecoming. The news has traveled across the country with a particular kind of warmth. After all, this is a story that belongs to Greece in a way few stories belong anywhere. There has been some debate over casting, voices raising questions about who should tell this tale. Who gets to inhabit these roles? It's the kind of conversation that surfaces whenever a beloved cultural inheritance meets the machinery of global film production. But beneath the chatter, there's anticipation. Real anticipation. People in Greece have lived with the Odyssey for nearly 3,000 years. It's in the schoolrooms, the theaters, the small coastal villages where fishermen still set out at dawn to see it rendered by a director of Nolan's stature, with whatever choices he makes, feels for many like watching an old friend step onto a very large stage. Whether the film honors the source or stumbles in the translation, Greece will be watching. And in a sense, the story has already done its work. It has survived centuries, crossed oceans, and come home again, as it always does. That's worth carrying into the night. Cape Verde, the 10-island nation off the west coast of Africa, has been finding its way into conversations it never used to appear in. The reason is football. Cape Verde's national team has had a World Cup run that turned heads, and the roots of it, we're told, go deep into youth programs, the kind of steady, unglamorous investment that doesn't make headlines until suddenly it does. For a country of roughly 500,000 people spread across islands in the Atlantic, reaching football's biggest stage is the sort of thing that changes how the world sees you, and it seems to be changing things in other ways too. Travel writers have been noticing the archipelago lately, mentioning it in the same breath as its World Cup heroics, as though the tournament gave people permission to look twice at a place they'd been overlooking. Even science got involved. A newly discovered sea snail was named after Cape Verde's goalkeeper, Vozinha, a small tribute from one corner of the world to another. There's a phrase that's been floating around in all this. Maybe there are not small teams anymore. It's a football saying, but it carries further than that. It's about what happens when a place invests in its young people, waits patiently, and then watches them step onto a stage everyone said was too big. Tonight, on these islands in the Atlantic, that's a story worth sitting with. Afghanistan carries a quiet burden that doesn't always reach the headlines. UNICEF is warning that 3.7 million children under 5 are at risk of malnutrition. That number is hard to sit with. It isn't a single event or a sudden catastrophe. It's a deepening strain, the kind that settles into a country over years of hardship and doesn't easily lift. For families across Afghanistan, feeding the youngest has become part of the daily struggle. The humanitarian pressure has been mounting, and the smallest are always the most vulnerable when resources thin. A child under 5 is still growing, still building the body that has to carry them through life. Malnutrition at that age leaves marks that don't always show right away, but they endure. UNICEF's warning is a call to the wider world, a reminder that behind every figure is a small life held in someone's arms. The crisis is not new, but it is deepening. And in a country already carrying so much, that weight falls heaviest where it can least be borne. If you're still with me, let that number rest for a moment. 3.7 million, each one a child, each one someone's hope. Afghanistan's story is not a loud one, but it is worth carrying into the quiet. Costa Rica has been quietly moving its drug police back to the places where travelers cross, the airports, the border posts, the points of entry that thread this small Central American nation into the wider world. It's the kind of decision that doesn't make much noise. But it says something about how a country positioned between production and consumption keeps its footing. Costa Rica sits on a narrow bridge of land between two continents, and for years that geography has made it a corridor, not a destination. Usually just a place the traffic passes through. Returning officers to airports and frontier crossings is a practical move, a reassertion of presence where presence matters. There's no grand announcement in it, no sweeping new doctrine, just people in uniform watching the doors again. If you've ever flown into San Jose at dusk, you know the feeling, the green hills rising close, the air warm and heavy, the sense that you've arrived somewhere that takes its calm seriously. Costa Rica has no standing army. It chose that path more than 70 years ago, and it remains a point of quiet pride. So when the country talks about security, it tends to mean police work, border work, the unglamorous business of paying attention. This week's move fits that tradition. Nothing dramatic, just a country keeping watch at its own doors, the way a careful household does. Argentina has long been a country that argues about rights, who holds them, who grants them, where the line is drawn. This week, an Argentine court drew that line in an unexpected place. 2 goldfish, the court ruled, are sentient beings, not property, not decoration, living creatures capable of feeling and deserving of recognition under the law. It's the kind of story that might make you pause, maybe smile, maybe wonder whether the world has gone strange. But stay with it for a moment. The idea behind the ruling isn't really about fish, not entirely. It's about a question that more countries are beginning to ask quietly, whether the capacity to suffer, to feel, to experience the world ought to matter in the eyes of the law, regardless of the shape or size of the creature involved. Argentina has been here before in small ways. Its courts and its constitution have a habit of stretching toward dignity, of testing old boundaries. This particular decision won't reshape the night. 2 goldfish, somewhere, swim on as they did before, probably unaware of anything that's changed. But something has changed in the way a society talks about lives smaller than our own. And if you're still with me, drifting toward sleep, maybe that's a thought worth holding. That somewhere in the world, a court paused to consider the inner life of a fish and decided it counted. And that's the world for tonight. Wherever you are, whatever tomorrow holds, rest easy. The world will keep turning slowly while you sleep, and we'll take another quiet trip around it tomorrow night. Good night.